There's no. Thanks, Marianne. Yes, and
Good evening, everyone. I know the clock bells at 6:59, but it's 7 Central Standard Time.
make any money.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 8th, 2024 meeting of the North Texas Archaeological Society.
We get our form.
Our presentation this evening, I've got a few general business items to run through. First of all, welcome to our new members. NTAS has added 11 new members since our March meeting. It is no longer time to renew your NTAS membership. It wouldn't be a slideshow if I didn't make a mistake. If you have not renewed your NTAS membership, please do so. But at this point, if you have not renewed, your membership has lapsed. This is a reminder that there are free NTAS memberships for students. The NTAS sponsors student membership. Please visit our scholarship page if you are interested in getting a free membership to NTAS. Saturday, April 27th, SMU will be hosting their 4th open laboratory day for NTAS from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. As we've stated before, this will be a recurring event the last Saturday of every month through May. I know we are currently in negotiations with SMU to continue this relationship through the summer and into the fall. So please show up and support this opportunity. It's a really good one to get a chance to both help SMU and also get your hands on some artifacts, do some rebagging, filling out tags, all those exciting laboratory opportunities. There will be another workday at the Joe Reed site in late April, weather pending. Please contact Dana Ritchie for more information. This is a reminder that the 65th annual Caddo Conference will be held at the Don Tyson Center for Agricultural Studies at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. That is a mouthful. The weekend of April 26th and 27th. Our May 2024 guest speaker will be Vicki Roberts, who will be presenting on Andean petroglyphs from the coast of Peru. You all may know Vicki from her work with Shumla. She's pursuing a graduate school degree working on Andean material currently. She will be presenting on that in May. A reminder that the 2024 Archaeological Society of New Mexico meeting will be held May 3rd through 5th in Las Vegas, New Mexico. The general theme of the meeting is the interaction between Plains groups and Highland New Mexican groups. Our own Chris Lentz will be presenting at the conference. So if you'd like to go to Las Vegas, New Mexico for that conference, please do so. The Journal of Texas Archaeology and History has released their special volume number 6, The Archaeology of Eagle Nest Canyon, Texas, papers in honor of Jack and Wilma Skiles. This is a free journal. So, and this volume is very extensive. It has a lot of really good research in it. So if you have not followed the link that I've sent in our monthly emails to download that volume or get a hard copy of that volume, please consider doing so. There is new Bolivar Archaeological Project video content available to the public. Please visit the website I have listed here to watch it. The video stars Howard Cook, who is the great-great-grandson of the blacksmith Tom Cook. Registration is open for TAS Field School, which will be held June 8th through 15th in Nacogdoches. For more information, visit the TAS website. It's a general reminder to everyone that NTAS scholarships are available to anyone who applies for all TAS academies, the field school, and the annual meeting. Non-NTAS members may apply. If they receive a scholarship, they will also receive a membership to NTAS. So please visit our website to apply or send someone there to apply. If you know someone who would like to attend field school and receive a scholarship for it. I told Mike I'd be fast. I might have been faster than even I anticipated. So please join me in welcoming our April 2024 guest speaker, Mike McBride.
That loud enough? Y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thanks. Yeah, thank you, Al. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be back. As many of you know, I was part of the Dallas Archaeological Society for about 6 or 8 years. Back in the late 90s, early aughts. And everything you're going to hear tonight is because of generally 4 people. Alan Skinner, Jim Blanton, Paul Lorraine, and Brian Jameson. When I first got started over there in Dallas, you know, I had done a little bit of field work, a little bit in Central America, but they really got me started on the property and excavation, all that stuff in Texas, Texas archaeology. So kind of took off from there. Alan's indulged me a little bit. I wear about 3 different hats. I'm actually part of the Galt School of Archaeological Research. I'm on the board there. And I'm also co-director along, y'all know John Lowe? Dr. John Lowe, yeah, you've probably worked with him before. John and I started this project after some research that I did in Belize a couple of years ago. Alan allowed me to do a little fundraising request for these audiences as I do present our very brief report of our field season. And so the Pine Ridge Pre-Ceramic Project is in northern Belize. John is principal investigator. I kind of put the thing together and manage it. Is this? Yeah, it should be. There you go. Yeah, and we've got a really multidisciplinary group that works with us both here and Belize, including Dr. Charles Frederick, along with some other specialists in Mesoamerican archaeology. Everybody know where Belize is? Y'all been there? Kind of a little bit south of Yucatan on the Caribbean coast. There you go. Yeah, and our work site is called August Pine Ridge. It's a little bit rural. It's about 3 or 4 miles from the Mexican border on the Rio Hondo here. Most of y'all, if you've been to Belize, you've been to Belize City on the tour, on the trips. Has anybody been to some of the ruins in Belize? Yeah. Like Altoon High and Cajalpech, let's see. We didn't have any. As you'll see, the northern part of Belize is really flat. There's only a few Maya sites there, and I'll explain why. We are, number one, we are out we are out of the chert-bearing zone. Not a whole lot of resources were in this area 10, 12,000 years ago, but what we think is this is a very large ancient sand dune, series of sand dunes that were created, back before the Ice Age. This is the village. This is the village of August Pine Ridge. It's about 3,000 to 4,000 people there in northern Belize. In the overhead, you can the whole area for a number of miles, 10 miles by about 5 miles, is this very large sand accumulation. And so you can see it pretty well on these slides here. And this is what it looks like. The main industry of this area is mining the sand. And when I say mining, basically it is hand digging this sand. It's really white, fluffy, look kind of like Florida beach sand, really white, fluffy sand. That's really ancient, but for decades, this area has been dug for this really white, pure, fluffy beach sand for construction. And there's no machinery. The only machinery out in the area is these very large dump trucks. And everything filling them and everything is done by hand, by the local workers. This is kind of how they make their living. And out of the sand, as they dig it, we do find artifacts. They find artifacts coming out of the sand. There's not much stratigraphy. We're having Dr. Frederick really look at the stratigraphy of this, trying to determine, where these artifacts are coming from, but they are very old. They're archaic. When I say archaic period, it's the same as us. Just about everything here is older than 5,000 years BP, which means it is 2,000 years older than the first Maya settlements, right? The Maya pretty much got rolling around 1000 BC, something like that, 800,000 BC, when they first started developing corn culture. And there's a whole story about that. But anyway, that's kind of the period that we're working with here, starting around 4,000 to 5,000 BC. I'm sorry, BP, and then working down. So I got a little, I don't know whether this will, there you go. So basically this is our guys. We've got one big crew. This is their day job. So when we're there, we'll employ them. Well, they look forward to us coming, because they'll, on a good day, they'll fill 2 to 3, 4 trucks, something like that, for $15. $15 if on a good day, a piece. Whereas we'll employ them for 3 or 4 weeks straight every day. So that's some days they have 0 trucks, some days they have 2 or 3. So they just get by. But that's how these guys make their living. But over decades of the sand mining, their grandfathers, their uncles, they find this stuff in that sand layer and they bring it home. So in the village, many of the households have a box, and that box has just everything these people have found interesting. They're not looting or anything. They're just finding this stuff interesting and bringing it home. And so this is some of the collections we started seeing in Belize. And I'll show you some of the artifacts that were recovered, that we're documenting, et cetera. But in the sand, what we were calling Paleo Islands, since the sand has been dug for decades, acres and acres, we were looking for these spots. that were maybe big enough to put a couple of units in, which we did, strung a tarp across the trees and whatnot. So when they weren't filling the trucks, the work guys came in and worked for us. But as we looked at boxes throughout the village or whatever, they were kind enough to let us pick out the really diagnostic pieces and loan them to us for study and cataloging. And so this was kind of the first season. And everything you see there is pretty much 4,000 years old and older, which is really rare in Belize. Anybody who's read Belize archaeology, the number of paleo and archaic aged diagnostic points that have come out of there is probably less than 20 or 30. Whereas what we have begun documenting is 3 times that much, all in one swath. Mainly because we have discovered basically where a lot of it is coming from, which is this sand ridge. So one of the keys to our research is the age of these artifacts throughout is undocumented in all of Central America. And one of the keys is these fluted bifaces. Recognize that that's kind of the typical Clovis biface looking point. And then these, what we call recurved or wasted Clovis, because the base does kind of come in on itself, but it is fluted on both sides. And then these what we call fishtails. This is true South American technology. So what we're gathering is the data to try to understand how is all 3 of these sets of technology converging all in this one little corner of Belize. It's a real mystery, but the comparative morphology is exactly the same of what we see in South America with these fishtails like this. And then with the big macroflakes, the overshot technology, which is common in North American Clovis technology. So we have these big macroflakes that are generally overshot flakes. And this overshot technology does show up on a lot of the specimens, and it's really consistent. So there's, another, we do have multiple examples of that typical Clovis base. We do have a number of these. Even the really interesting thing is that even on these really small points, this one here on the left is only about 3 inches long, but even the small ones, they do attempt to flute everything, even unifaces. Like you'll see this guy here, this is a little flake about 2.5 inches long. It's curved, but even on the uniface side, they did try to flute it. So, one of the questions is, fluting technology is way up and down North America all the way to Argentina. So what are the differences in technology that we're seeing, and why is the fluting technology so important to these people? And this is 12,500 to 13,000 years ago. And we have failures. We've got the whole gamut of flint knapping experience here, from failures to broken points to really small ones that they did finish out. So the question is, where is all this coming from? And I'll try to get through this. We have identified new archaic points. These Pine Ridge points like this are nowhere in the literature. They've not shown up in any Belize literature. There are similar points from northern South America that are kind of like this. And there's these are the South American points that kind of look similar with the stem, and then the type, the beach type in Trinidad in the Caribbean. So here again, there's a mixing of crossroads technology. These lanceolates, that they're unfluted, whether they're directly post-Clovis, we're really trying to, this is one other question. As far as these late paleo points here, some of them are almost fluted and nippled, but some not. And then we have these big archaic or late paleo and early archaic low points. These things are almost as, I've got some casts up here. These things are almost big as your palm. And they're thick. They're almost like a harpoon point. They're that thick and sturdy. We have no idea what they were used for, but there's a lot of them here in the catalog. I'll go ahead. And then the other archaic points that look nothing like the low points, really. These sawmill points are probably early archaic, maybe 8,000 to 9,000 years, but that's one of the questions. Can we date? And then these big unifaces that start to look Clovis, but we don't find them in Clovis context, but they are the same technology is in Cuba and the Caribbean. There again, the question is how much interchange was there? And then these are, oops, sorry. Now these are more agricultural. These are really later, almost by the time that the Maya got rolling. So the whole assemblage is all the way through, 2,000 to 3,000 BC, all the way down to 13. We were back in March to do some setup, and our guys, the workers, brought us, a whole new set of artifacts from their boxes. This is one of them. Clearly a uniface fluted on this side here, and then finished out with a really nice flute on the dorsal side of it. Here's another one. And the material that these people were using was the very best material they could get a hold of. A lot of this carnelian, this orange, translucent stuff shows up. We don't know where it comes from. I have not identified the quarries yet. They're there somewhere, but consistently they're using 2 to 3 to 4 types of chert, and that's it. And it's really high quality stuff. Like this orange speckled. They use a lot of it. There again, we don't know where it's coming from. And then they brought us some more, another Pine Ridge point, some more examples of the low points and the lanceolates. So they continually, as they move to a new spot to begin digging again, they only go down 4 or 5 feet because there's clay underneath it, and they won't use clay for cement. But this is all in a lens, a big sand lens of maybe 4 or 5 feet. So, there's part of our crew, the Torres family. We are sponsored by the Galt School, but we are our own project, and we are fundraising. So I've got some of the replicas up here of some of the points that I made, the replicas of just what you saw here. And also my information is on these flyers. You can get a hold of me, all my information here, or come through the Galt site. The Galt site website does have one of our write-ups on there, so you can see that too. So we, any consideration, we do appreciate it, but we have no grants. We're all individual sponsors and donations. So,
Thanks for joining us this evening. No, I'm kidding. Not had a chance to see the replicas and things, please do so before you go there.
Mike named the replicas. He's an excellent napper, so please do take a look at those. Amazing.
good, okay. Okay, this is my other hat. As a project manager for the Crying Woman archaeological site there in outside of Kerrville. How many of y'all went to Kemosabe field school? Yeah. Did any of y'all come out to the site that I did? Because one afternoon we went out there. So a couple of y'all, yeah, you've been out there. So we've been working on the Crying Woman project site for a little bit over 5 years. We were contacted by the landowner about 5.5 years ago to come out and survey. It has a very large, the terrace has a very large mounded midden on it. So the surface collection was really intriguing. So we launched into a full-scale excavation project about 5.5 years ago. But here it is, kind of within the Edwards Hill Country outside of Kerrville. There's Kemosabe, where some of y'all were. And so Crying Woman is about it's about 30 minutes drive out west. But it's on the Guadalupe, it's on a terrace of the Guadalupe River. Here's the site. It's about 7 acres. It's on a really nice big flat terrace above the river on the east side. One of the things, the landowner has a total of about 150 or 200 acres. This is just part of the 7 acres, just part of it. But this is their house here on the bluff. Along in here, it's a flat terrace and then backed up on about a 40-foot bluff and then upland behind it here. So why Crying Woman? When we first got there and got to know the landowners, Mike and Sandy, they had only owned the property for 2 or 3 years. They did business in Smithville and decided to relocate out here near Hunt. And so one of the stories we got is that when Sandy went to the property and went up on top of, went up on the bluff to the big house, this was her view for miles and miles of hill country, the canyonlands and everything. So she started to cry from happiness. So yeah, we know that Texas, when Texas girls are happy, they don't weep, right? But Texas girls can cry. So it's a happy story. So kind of going back through the timeline here, this is the first deed that we're able to find in 1873 for this general area. The deed did encompass the site, so we knew that there was farmsteading here back in the late 19th century. So that's kind of what it looks like, not really, but. So kind of starting with the top end of the artifacts. We have this colored glass, this patinaed glass, somewhere between the late 19th, early 20th century. and quite a bit of it, broken, what we think is the farmstead, foundation in the back of the site. We also had, salt glazed pottery. Does anybody know what this is? I mean, I couldn't find a great deal of references, but it seems to be late 19th century. So there is evidence of that. Seems like they did their own blacksmithing, because we found a number of broken horseshoes, of mule shoes, a lot of nails, some other farm implements that seem to be blacksmith right there on the site. They also did a lot of shooting. On the surface or near the surface, we found these clusters of spent cartridges. One of their favorites seemed to be the 44 caliber Henry rifle. Y'all familiar with that? And we found a number of these, those double, the double rim firing pin, which is specific for the Henry rifle. And then the 50-70, and both of these, both the Henry and this were patented and used a great deal in the latter part, post-Civil War, in the latter part of the 19th century. So we've got a fair amount of good artifacts and good evidence of occupations then. These glass sherds here, we looked at them really quite a bit, because they're not like the regular glass that we were finding. These are really thick, heavy sherds of glass. They're a lot more heavily patinaed than the other sherds that we found, and some of them are flint knapped. Well, they're glass knapped into tools like spoke shave, perforator, little spoke shave, and basically they look like they took the place of chert making tools. And so, one of the interpretations is this is that contact period where, the French and the Spanish showed up with their heavy glass wine bottles and all that kind of stuff. The Native Americans would come into their camps behind them and scrounge whatever they could. So these could be examples of contact period, maybe 18th century, early 19th century, but they are, they're not settler artifacts. These are Native American artifacts from historic pieces. So we've got that period, the historic transition, and so here's the layout. Here's the river. This is kind of a high spot here, and this is where the bigger mounted midden was. So this is where we started the excavation units, right on the southwest side. So that's just a kind of an example of some of the time periods of the late prehistoric, the bow and arrow, some cooking, mano and matate, and some pottery. Obviously, this is not a Caddo site or whatever, but we do have quite a few sherds of the fingernail punctated ceramics. Apparently those are Caddo influence, right? I'm not a ceramicist, but that's more Caddo influence that were brought in, and also the Doss red from apparently Central Texas. So we're starting to get into the late prehistoric here. We also found these hematite concretions. Seem to be, these are either they're manuports because they don't occur in Central Texas, but a lot of the sites in the area have found these. And also we found, we had this, this quartz crystal that is actually worked. The really clear quartz did not occur in our area, so it had to be manuported in as well. But on most of the pieces, these little notches are flint napped in. They're napped in and ground to possibly make some kind of an adornment, to tie a string around, to make an adornment or something like that. But there again, these were traded in as well. So get into the earth oven era, the archaic era, the atlatl, prior to the bow and arrow. What I understand is the bow and arrow came into Texas around 500 AD, something like that, right? So anyway, this is the block around the mounded midden that we put in first. It turned out to be almost around a 6x6, and we took it down as long as we had culture here. So we did have Toya phase arrow points on the top. The ceramics and obsidian, and I'll show you the obsidian, were relatively shallow as well. And we had a number of animal bones as well. So within this these sheet middens, these ground middens, or hearths rather, we did have an assortment of deer and bison and turkey. And we didn't understand whether the canine was wolf, coyote, domestic dog, or whatever, but there was a whole assemblage of animals here. And this, we only found 2 flakes of obsidian, these little bitty finishing flakes. But Dr. Hester got involved, and we sent him off to Dr. Glasscock at Missouri, and they came back from the quarry in Malad, Idaho. And from what we understand from Tom Hester is that there seemed to be a trade route in the late Archaic. I'm looking at you, Alan. I'm hoping you're not. That came down from Malad, from Idaho, the west, the east Rockies, and ended up north and panhandle of north and central Texas. So there is a good collection of malad obsidian in Texas. We ended up with a couple of little pieces of it. So from the diagnostic projectiles just in these blocks, like I said, we did start with the Perdiz and Edwards arrow points, the transitional archaic into early archaic, and then down into middle archaic, the typical Pertinalis, Montel, those kind of guys. We got down, and then the Uvalde and early triangular were more. I mean, this whole site has been kind of not totally disturbed, but there's been farming on it and everything like that for quite a while. So we did find some pretty interesting surface finds with the early archaic points, but both of those were on the surface. In context, we got down to about 60 centimeters of depth in the block, and then it was sterile. The oldest points that we found were probably Pertinalis, and I didn't show the Langtree, those middle archaic, maybe 3,500 years old. But below that, and we went down to 2 meters in the sediment here, and everything below 60 centimeters was sterile. So using that very indirect evidence, we can think of the big mounded midden there, probably maybe 3,000 years old or something like that. And it is a pretty big typical midden, but maybe an indirect way of dating it. So this happened in the back, in the back part up by the bluff. Mike Hightower put in a water line for his RV back there. And so, like good archaeologists, anytime you got a pile of dirt that's throwing up, we went back there and we were sifting through it or whatever and came up with this point here. We didn't know what it was. We'd never seen anything like it or whatever. Kind of looked it up and turned out to be St. Mary's Hall. Got a hold of Tom Hester. He got real excited. If you know the history of Dr. Hester and the St. Mary's Hall point, that he, it kind of goes back to one of his excavations, I think in '74, in San Antonio at St. Mary's University or St. Mary's Academy in northern San Antonio, where they were putting in a foundation for a new building at St. Mary's Academy. And they put the foundation right on a very, very large midden site there. So Dr. Hester I think he ran that, at least part of it. And in that project, they started finding these type points which were originally thought to be a form of plain view. But they started showing up in other late paleo contexts from other sites. And so I think it was the Wilson Leonard write-up that Susan Dial did. I think she actually gave the name St. Mary's Hall point to this type, kind of referring back to Dr. Hester's first work in excavating a bunch of these. We also found some on the surface. We also found some Angostura. So we kind of knew that this other area back here, here's the big mound up here, but this is kind of a flat terrace back up by the bluff. So we started really thinking about this. Is this really different? It was different, very different. So this is where we've been working for the last 4.5 years in what we call the paleo area. So this is kind of what when you saw the low spot in the center, which is kind of a relatively recent flood chute headed toward the river. Here's kind of a picture of what the bluff looks like in the middle of summer when it's all grown over. But this is the area where we've been working. We've put in the first set of units almost where the surface finds were made. In these 3 units in a block. We worked on this block for about a year, and the reason being we do almost every Monday. We've got a core group of 8 or 10 members who do come out, and we do excavate almost every Monday that we can. But even with one crew, it's been slow. But anyway, in this block, we started finding St. Mary's Hall material, diagnostic material, and you can see just in a general diagram how much of it was there. So this is what we're talking about. These are not, and I've got the real ones here. In this other case, I do have some of the selected artifacts from the crime woman site. These are not great big points. They're about as big as your index finger. They're really thin, but they're really elegantly well made. And the diagnostic is not only the concave base with 2 or 3 little thinning flakes there, but also the parallel oblique flaking. That's what this is called. It's at an angle. Really don't know why they chose to flint knap it like that, But the, one of the diagnostics for this is this type, that type flaking. What we started to find is the samples, the examples of this type, which is top left to bottom right. That oblique. Whereas if you go back to the literature, a lot of the other St. Mary's Hall from other assemblages are exactly the opposite. They're coming top right to bottom left. So there's been, we've explored other thoughts about this. The first thing I thought was, you know, is this left-handed, right-handed napping or whatever? But what I and some of my colleagues have determined, you can do it either way, depending on how you're holding the biface, and there's ways of doing it. I think it's just probably passed down to who was a teacher, who was a student. This is the way this group does it. And then, you know, that's why you get this mix. So in this unit, when we're finding a lot of the St. Mary's Hall points and fragments, we came down on this feature here, feature 1. And what this turned out to be was basically a flat limestone barbecue grill. It was a flat limestone blocks, all about 3/4 of a meter like this. But for the most part, they were all in place. This was in situ. It wasn't pulled apart very much. And this was about 70 centimeters down, right in the lens, the big lens of where the St. Mary's Hall material was coming from. So there's kind of an overhead of it. Here's a griddle, and we had this whole, right here at the same level, we had this whole cluster of St. Mary's Hall material, fragments and a couple of points. And also out of this level were these bones here. We sent the bones to Dr. Prendergast at Rice, who's a paleo zoologist, or anyway, she works on paleo bones. And she identified these as bison antiquus. From what we understand, bison antiquus went extinct maybe about 9,000 years ago, 8,500, 9,000 years ago. We sent them off for dating and got some numbers back. Thought I had a picture of the charcoal. We did underneath the limestone in the griddle. We did retrieve, you know, quite a bit of good black charcoal. So we sent that in to Penn State along with the bison bone. The bison came back at around 10,006 to 10,003. So maybe 10,004 cal BP. And then the charcoal, which was about 1.5 meters from it, came back at about 10,002 to 10,004. So the whole the new information in this piece that we were able to provide is really good solid dating on the St. Mary's Hall flint pipe. And it, up to this point, it was really not all that well established. So you have the bone here, the charcoal sitting here, whole assemblage of St. Mary's Hall material. So it's something new in the database. So we moved to our second block went over about 8 meters to the west, and we put in over the period of about 2 or 3 years, we just extended a number of units into about a 4x6. So when you look at a profile of this block 2, this is where it gets really interesting. Not only comparatively with block 1, where there was really no FCR, no cooking except for the griddle. This is where in this area where the cooking was taking place. So we have an early archaic ground hearth here, a big collection of FCR here in the north, an intact earth oven here, and other small ground hearths below it. So this is as we opened up this block, right under the surface, was this feature here, this kind of ground hearth. It was about 6 to 8 centimeters below the surface, just right there. This is what it looked like when we did. It was about a meter round, about, oops, sorry. About 30 centimeters thick, pretty well intact, not pulled apart very much. But in there, we found these 3 points right in the matrix of the FCR. So we have Laguna, Bandy, and Martindale, all in one group. This really tight, early archaic group, maybe 5,000 to 6,000, 7,000 BP. Since this was intact, what we started to realize was when we were standing on the surface of this terrace, we weren't dealing with any really other middle archaic stuff because we hadn't found any surface stuff there. So what we're doing is starting at about 5,000 or 6,000 BP and working down as we excavate. And the stratigraphy pretty well bears that out. Over in the north, here's the first one. Here's this big collection of very unorganized FCR. This was probably multiple cooking events. It was really churned up. There was a lot of tree roots in here, but throughout this matrix here, there was a lot of St. Mary's Hall material mixed in with that FCR matrix. Okay. So here's a cross section. The FCR was, it went down to about 90 centimeters, really not well organized, but the St. Mary's Hall material was strewn throughout. So you get the picture of there's St. Mary's Hall levels. There's 10,200-year-old levels there, but as they dug those pits up, they dug them up, they burned, they threw them out. All of that mixing over probably a couple of thousand years in this feature, there was really no very reliable stratigraphy here. We did find one deer bone that tested at about 9,000. So we got one pretty solid date out of that mix of FCR, but there was really no retrievable on the north side, no retrievable charcoal. This is the south half of the block here. And what we came down on here was what has turned out to be a pretty intact earth oven. This picture was taken about last year when we really started to define it. And it looks a lot different than any other midden that we've ever seen, well, especially the first one, the archaic one, because you can see how large the limestone blocks are. And usually that's kind of an indication of the number of times this oven was used. And a lot of those blocks are not broken. They're just as they kind of came out of the ground. So we figure this oven here was only used maybe two or three times total and then abandoned. And actually, Charles Frederick gave me the thumbs up on that. So you've got some scatter here. Oops, sorry. You've got some scatter. Here's the center. We excavated this a bit, but there is kind of there's a central cooking area here. So as far as dates, or as far as the stratigraphy, here is the early archaic, the Bandy Laguna group up here shallow, and then over here, right above the lens, right above the FCR lens, there was a whole assemblage of Angostura and Golondrina, which is transitional paleo, late transitional Paleoindian, so about 9,000, 9,500. But they were all in one group, right clustered right there. And then down here lower, we had 3 more pieces of St. Mary's Hall diagnostic material lower. So this area here is really pretty well intact. And that's why we have left it alone. We've left this alone for about 2.5 years, waiting for the help that came last week. So here's the Golondrinas and the Angosturas that came out of that one batch within maybe a 3/4 of a meter from each other. So they were pretty well clustered and pretty well undisturbed. That whole area above the oven was pretty well undisturbed. Then we have these lanceolates here. They're unfluted lanceolates. I've had a number of people look at these and we can't figure out what they are. They're not St. Mary's Hall. They're too big. I've got them with me. They're too big to be St. Mary's Hall. They're too thin to be Dalton. They're not really Golondrina. We don't know what they are, but they're in the St. Mary's Hall layer. So they're somewhere in the mid to late Paleo lens. So we left like I said, we left the earth oven alone and kept going down in these side units, and we came across this little hearth right here, which is right here, which is below. It's below the level of the earth oven. Okay. And this is what it looked like. It's pretty well all intact. It's a little basin. All of the stuff, several of the stones were upright, just like this, kind of forming some kind of cooking basin or whatever. We did get charcoal out of here. It's part of the next set we're going to the lab. But so you have this little ground hearth here below the level of the earth oven. Okay. And so we kept going, and then there was another hearth, just a small ground hearth here, about a meter away, about on the same level. And this is what it looked like. It was the stones were flat. Some of them were maybe turned over by animal activity or whatever. Well, this we did get charcoal out of here, and this charcoal, this is kind of what it looked like. That charcoal there came back at 10,000 to 10,250. So right within the St. Mary's Hall levels, but stratigraphy is a little bit below, but we do have a good solid date on it. So we kept on going, but what we realized right at that level, those little hearths were about 110 to about 125 centimeters in depth. The intact earth oven went from about 70 to about 1 meter. So these two hearths are below it. And what we found is these hearths were basically resting on a gravel bar. This is an ancient gravel bar at about 130 centimeters that We didn't know. I mean, the top of it was some kind of living surface in this unit because the hearth was right there, and we found flake tools back here. On this surface, so it took a while for us to deal with what we were going to do with the gravel bar. So we did drop one unit lower and kept going. And what we determined is that the gravel bar is about half a meter deep here, but within, and it's unsorted. So geologically, it's not like, you know, the little stuff is on top, the big stuff's on the bottom, that kind of sort you see in a lot of river gravel bars. It's all mixed up. It's all together. So Dr. Frederick kind of, this is another question for him. Where, you know, obviously it's older than 10,002. But is it one event? Is it several events or whatever? Well, we did have a number of artifacts in there that kind of got jumbled in a little bit, and then artifacts underneath it as well. These guys here. I didn't bring this one below. Within the lower part of the gravel was this ovoid scraper. It's about 4 inches, and we didn't clean it up because we're going to try to get some residue or some kind of residue off of there, because it's one of the deepest we've found, and it looks nothing like anything we've found so far. And then, but it does kind of look like a little bit of the big flake scrapers that come out of Clovis, out of the Galt site cattle. So we're not claiming anything, but we're looking for comparable diagnostic stuff. And then this core here was right at the bottom. It was below the gravel layer, and it's kind of beat up. It's not great chert. Definitely human activity. Looks kind of like some of the cores that came out of Galt, but these are these teasers that we keep getting. So last week we had about over 20 of our colleagues out, other avocationals, to work on the site with us. And we're talking about this, the block 2, they were able to start profiling the big earth oven. And what we're finding here is, what we're determining pretty much is the center is here. This is kind of scatter here from the last cooking event, but under here is a whole layer, very organized limestone. So we're starting to get the feel for what this thing actually looked like. And we did get some charcoal out of here, so it's going to the lab as well. So overall, in block 2, we have pretty good stratigraphy over here. All of this seems to be in good shape, with early archaic on the top, transitional paleo a little bit above it, and then St. Mary's Hall and those lanceolates below it, and then well below it over here, 10,250, resting right on top of that gravel. So like I said, and then in February, we finally got around to putting in a backhoe trench off to the side, about 30 meters from the blocks down to about 9 feet, because what we had last week was an invitational event. So we worked on all three blocks with a lot of help out there. Dr. Frederick and our colleague Tori Pagano is a professional field archaeologist with Terracon. And so they were doing a lot of geoarchaeology, both in the trench and from the blocks. We're waiting on their reports, but Dr. Frederick has he says he's got a pretty good handle on the sediment layers there and where they should be, where the paleo is, where the paleosol is and whatnot. And we're in pretty good stratigraphy apparently. But we worked on 3 areas. You guys know this guy here. I don't know whether he's watching or not. But anyway, we worked on 3 areas, the 2 blocks and then the trench as well. And we couldn't do much with the trench dirt, but some real eager folks got into the dirt piles that were dumped out. And we as the backhoe was digging, we had a rough estimate of where that dirt was as the piles moved, of how deep he was getting. So we could kind of generally know what dirt when these folks were kind of sifting through here on some downtime, maybe what where they were in the trench dirt. So this is the new stuff that came out. These were pretty shallow, these Angostura, I call them Angostura knives, and there's kind of a term for them. They're Angostura aged, it's Angostura flaking, but they're bigger. The whole ones are about 4.5 inches long. I guess they're big hand knives. So these 2 kind of came out together fairly shallow in part of block 1. And then we had more samples of St. Mary's Hall as well. As you can see, here's our same odd flaking top left to bottom right that seems really even on this broken piece. Oops. Even on this broken piece here, this one was not finished, but still they started that same flaking pattern. These came out of the trench dirt. This is the folks who went back and were kind of sifting through the trench dirt. There's not a whole lot of context here, but what this kind of confirms, even in this 8-foot trench, we've got examples of the stratigraphy that we know we've got as far as the early triangular at about 5,000 to 6,000 BP. We hadn't found a Gower point before, but that came out of there. So a little bit older, about 7,000 to 9,000 years. The word I was looking for a while ago is a Wilson point. We've never had one of these before, but this came out of what we believe is some of the deepest dirt that came out of the trench. And it's almost coincidental to the St. Mary's Hall material, even though it's notched. So this was, it was a really productive week, and we got a lot of new data. This is probably the most important stuff that came out of the trench. Don't know how, it was pretty, we figure it was pretty deep. But I passed this around. I had my own ideas about this, but I passed it around to some of my colleagues, and I really thought this was false. But people more knowledgeable than me are kind of thinking maybe Midland, which is about 11,000 years right after Folsom. Sometimes they're mixed. In some of the West Texas sites, I think Midland and Folsom sometimes are mixed. So they're right in there together. This is about 1,000 years older than anything else that we've come up with. So, we've got an idea of what we're going to do with that trench. We know where to look. They did find a pretty big, what looks like a bison bone at about 8 feet. So we've sent that off. So the putting in the trench has given us a lot better idea of what are in the deeper areas of the trench. So these are our landowners, Mike and Sandy. They've been the best people you'd ever want to work with. We have full access to the whole site whenever, because we've had a membership event out there. And they, Mike's attitude is, you guys can go as long as you want, stay as long as you want, which is great. So, and we're not doing this ourselves. We've had our professional colleagues involved since the very first. And we've had a lot of our own members out there on a regular basis. And some of you know, you talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. I don't know whether you guys knew Steve. He was really active in TAS, in the golf school, in the stewards. We unfortunately lost him a couple of years. He started the project, and then I took over for him. But a prince of a man, if you'd ever met him. So we appreciate being invited. I'd really be happy to answer any questions or anything.
Thanks, Mike. I think we have a few minutes for questions if there are any questions in the room.
Pottery? I'm sorry?
Did you buy into ceramics, pottery?
Yeah, by the big mid, the first big block that we opened up. Yeah, we had samples of punctated, looked like Caddo pottery there that was traded in. But none of it was really, my knowledge, made in the Hill Country in Central Texas. It was traded in. But yeah, we got over 30 pottery shirts there. So it was there. And it kind of goes in with finding the arrow points in that time framework of late prehistoric.
You had you showed a plan view of the unit where you said there was a lot of St. Mary's Hall material. Was all of that projectile points, or are you talking about debitage or other things you're associated with?
No, these, if I can go back, I don't want to make anybody dizzy. But we have found very few complete points. We've only found, I mean, the one little one that we found last week, that complete point, although it's really heavily resharpened, that was the first complete point, both tip and base, that we found probably in a year or two. Most of what we're finding are these bases and medial sections. But there's enough there to understand that it is diagnostically, it is St. Mary's because of the base, the concave base, there's little thinning flakes in that base. And even some of you can see here, even some of the bases have that oblique flaking all the way across. So, the material that we've called St. Mary's, I think we're pretty. The other thing is, it can't be anything else. I mean, we've not found any plane views out here, and in that time period for this morphology, the Angosturas are much thicker and much wider, and they don't have a concave base for the most part. So it's that process of elimination of what these things could be, even though the majority of what we're finding are fragments.
Any questions on Zoom?
Pardon?
No questions on the Zoom yet.
Oh, okay,
Any other questions in the room?
okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah, if you would, I mean, yeah, I'd be very, very happy to talk. I've got part of our prime woman assemblage. I've got plenty to show about the Belize project. If you take a flyer, my information's on there. And then some of our other information. Didn't I sent you a report. Alan's got a report. I don't know if you, yeah. But anyway, so I've got nowhere else to go, so as long as y'all got the room. Thank you very much.
You need a scoop from Mike Shannon. Sitting right there, they're extra sharp and ready to go. $15 gets donated to NTA, all proceeds donated to NTAS.
They're great.
They're great scoops for cereal, dirt, anything you want. Thank you again, Mike, and thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'll bring the April 11th, 2024 meeting of the NTAS of the North Texas Archaeological Society to a close. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Larry.
See much.
Yeah.